I'm Tom Sheppard. I was born and raised here on Sayers Neck Road in Lawrence Township in Cedarville, New Jersey. My family has been here on Sayers Neck Road since 1880 when my great-grandfather bought this farm we're on right now. And actually the house behind us is where my father was born. The Sheppards have been here for 350 years. So it's been a long time and been farmers ever since. We farm, my brother Erwin and I farm 1,500 acres of ground. We grow 400 acres of asparagus right now. We're only harvesting 350. We have another 50 acres that'll start harvesting next year. And as other asparagus comes out of production, we plant more. So we're going to be right around 400 acres. We do wholesale asparagus. It's what we do. We ship it all over the East Coast, from Florida to Canada. Eastern Fresh Grower Sheppard Farms sells a lot to chain stores, to other wholesalers, to restaurants and all these people, and it's because the way we do it. We harvest it, grade it, size it, wash it twice actually, and then it's hydro-cooled, so it's cold, it's wet, and ready to be stored for up to 2 weeks.
Good afternoon, my name is Steve Garrison. I'm a retired extension specialist with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. I grew up here in South Jersey on a farm, and our farm has been in the family for over 200 years. And I just enjoy being part of the agriculture community, and I look forward to sharing some of the information about asparagus production this afternoon. I'd like to share a little bit about the biology of asparagus as we begin here this afternoon. Asparagus is unique in that it is a perennial crop. There's not very many vegetables that are perennials, and the other thing unique is it's a monocot plant. And asparagus is also dioecious. That means that the male and female parts are on different plants. And for example, here's a female plant with berries and containing the seeds, and the male plant has flowers for pollination. And here we have some seeds, typical seeds of asparagus. They grow very slowly into a seedling, and this is a typical asparagus seedling. This might be 10, 12-week-old seedling, could be grown in a cell. And the seedling, after germination, forms a small crown. And the crown is composed of a rhizome with fleshy roots and fibrous roots attached to that. And also from the underground rhizome, there's formation of aerial buds, and these buds start underground, and they emerge into shoots and stalks, and then into a fern, this leafy fern. And then as the plant matures, the fern provides photosynthesis to enlarge the crown and the roots. And this is a very important part of asparagus production because the health of the crown and roots provide the organic nutrients that are used to supply the growth of the buds for the coming season. So we need to protect the fern, or the brush as we call it in the industry, from any damage from insects, diseases, or mechanical damage, because that's our photosynthetic supply for the next growing season. During the fall and early spring, the underground buds enlarge, and they emerge later in the spring to form the spears for the next growing season. So it's very important to maintain the crown and protect the foliage from damage, because that is our supply of nutrients for the upcoming year. It's important to do advanced planting for asparagus because, number one, asparagus is a perennial crop which is in the ground for many years, and also it has a very high cost of input in the first few years. So we need to make sure we have good plans and for our operation to be financially successful.
A person that's looking into growing asparagus has to realize it's not a several month process, it's a several year process. In the field we showed you transplanted asparagus that we grew from seed. We showed you crowns that we planted that way. The transplants are a cheaper way of doing it, but you plant them this year, next year you harvest nothing at all. The third year you harvest for maybe 2 weeks. The fourth year you actually go out there and harvest it for 2 months, and then from then on you have crop. But it's not something you do on a whim. You have to be ready to dedicate that ground to asparagus for up to 20 years. We took some of our first planted asparagus out last year, and it had been in the ground since 1997. So it was almost 20 years that it had been in the ground. To get ready to plant asparagus, you need to go out and work the ground. Make sure there's no hard pan. We go out with subsoiler and subsoil to get rid of the hard pan in the ground. We plow the ground. We use a power tiller to make the bed, and then we come through and dig a trench in the bed. We want the crown or the transplant to be at least 8 inches below the surface of the ground, the flat surface of the ground. And the drip is actually underneath that, a couple inches below that. Now, everything we've done since 2009, we use drip irrigation on. Everything was planted before that. There's 150 acres that was done without irrigation, except the first year we used it to get it started. Asparagus will grow without irrigation. It won't grow as good, but it will grow. So the original 140, 150 acres we planted, we probably averaged 150 boxes to the acre off that in its prime. Now the stuff we're doing now with drip irrigation, we're more like 225, 250 boxes to the acre because we can fertilize it through the drip when it's gone to fern, and when you really can't irrigate it with sprinklers when it's gone to fern because it's just too tall. You saw it in the field, it was probably 4 to 5 feet tall now, and that's only after a month and a half of growing. And in the spring, like I said, after you mowed it all down, you go out with that and work the ground on top of the crown. Be careful not to get down to the crown level, but you need to rework that and smooth out the top. Again, you want your crown to be at least 8 inches below the soil level. If you go too deep, it's a kind of a funny thing. If the asparagus is too deep, it comes up bigger. It'll be more your thumb size. And really what you're looking for in asparagus is more your index finger size or your little finger size. And everybody likes a different size asparagus, but usually the really big stuff you don't want. So if you go too deep, you're going to get real big asparagus.
The first-time growers use crowns to establish asparagus rather than seedlings because the use of crowns is less risky, requires less intensive management to control weeds and insects. Growers who are doing it commercially on a large scale can use herbicides. The use of seedlings is a very effective technique. So after we've selected the proper site, the next important thing is to have a soil test and to determine the pH and the nutrient status of the soil. And I recommend that if we're going to plant asparagus in 2020, that we get that soil test in the fall of 2018 so we can make corrections in 2019 and then be ready to plant in 2020. So asparagus requires pH in the range of 6.7 to 6.8 for optimum production. This is the optimum range.
A consideration for a grower would be cost. You can grow a crown, you can buy a crown for like 14 cents and then it's ready to go in the ground. If you want to buy your own seed, the hybrids you have to grow will be 4.5, 5 cents per seed, and then you grow them yourself. By the time you get done growing the transplant, you probably got a dime in it, and then you transplant that. So it's cheaper, by 40% to grow transplants, but you do actually lose some time in the field. So it's a trade-off. If you can get your crowns as early in the spring as you can get them, in the end of April, middle of April, early, the 1st of April if you can get them. Once the ground is not going to freeze, you want to get them in the ground so they get a full season of growth. Spacing of transplants and crowns, we've gotten down to where our original acreage was at 12 inches down the row, 60 inches between the row. We've got it down to 9 inches down the row and 60 inches between them. It's about 11,600 to the acre. It seems to be a good number. We had some transplants where we tried them a little closer together, but it seemed 9 inches works out very well. And then over time, that crown will fill in all that. And as you saw in some of the fields, when you plant it the first year, it's in a single row, and the next year it'll be 4 or 5 inches wide, and after 6 or 7 years, it'll be a foot wide, and after 15 years, it'll be 18 inches wide, where that crown comes up all through there. So yeah, it really branches out over time. Asparagus is like most vegetables, it wants as much sun as it can get. We've never grown anything in a shaded area. The more sun, the better. And sometimes if you're too restricted as far as trees around a field, it gets too hot. And too hot is not a good thing. If it gets too warm when you're harvesting, the asparagus starts to shoot, so you'll get long petioles on it, and it's not good marketable stuff.
The yield potential for a well-managed asparagus plot is anywhere from 0 to 300 pounds per acre the first harvest season, 500 to 1,000 pounds the second harvest season, and maybe 3,000 pounds the third, and then the fourth and on, it's about 4,000 pounds per acre on a well-managed asparagus field.
Typically, asparagus doesn't have a problem with frost. I say typically because last year we started harvesting actually in March. The ground warmed up. It's all a matter of a function of the ground warming up. The ground warmed up and the asparagus started to come up. And on the 4th of April last year, and anybody that is a farmer that remembers that time, we had a freeze, not a frost, we had a freeze, and it froze everything below the ground level. So we didn't harvest asparagus for 2 weeks. There was nothing there. So we came back 2 weeks later and started harvesting, and we ended up with a decent season, but it was stunted for that period of time. But usually it's not a problem because your ground doesn't warm up ahead of time, and once it does, you're okay. But it's a really important, the ground temperature in asparagus. If it's a warm day today, you'll harvest a lot of asparagus tomorrow. If it cools off tonight and tomorrow, you won't harvest much the next day. So it's all a function of temperature, and it's really tough to promise customers volume because it varies so much day to day what you're going to harvest. So it's only actually in the harvest mode for 2 months, from the middle to the beginning of April till the middle to the end of June. We actually harvest asparagus.
The first harvest season, which is usually the third growing season, we recommend 2 to 3 weeks of harvest. And then the fourth growing season and from there on, we recommend a 6 to 7 week harvest. And we recommend stopping the harvest when the spears become small and the tip quality becomes poor. That is, it's kind of open as opposed to very tight. After we have the harvested spears, the next step is to grade and size them. The USDA has standard grades. Usually the smallest grade is like 5/16 of an inch and smaller, and the largest is 14/16 and greater. Here I usually grade them into 3 categories. Some growers may grade them into 4 or 5 categories. And this depends on what the market needs and demands.
So then you need, in a packing house, you're going to need rubber bands. We use a band tag that has a UPC and a PLU on it. For our customers, they need that. If you're going to sell roadside, you don't need that. You need the rubber bands that just have asparagus on them, or a penny a piece. Those band tags are 4 cents a piece, so if you can get away without it, you're better off. It's much cheaper not to do it that way. In the packing house, you need some way of washing the asparagus. It could be as simple as a garden hose, but you are going to need to get it cold, because asparagus, if it doesn't get cold, it'll start going bad quickly. And if you want to smell something that's foul, it's rotten asparagus. We make our own bunching tables. And it can be as simple as just a table with we have a plastic top on it for food safety. It needs to be either stainless steel or something that's not permeable. It cannot be wood for us. I mean, people selling that don't have to go through the food safety stuff can maybe get away with wood. It cannot be wood for us. Nowhere in the packing house can there be wood. On that table, we made our own buncher. Depending on what size bunch you want, we have one that's for a 2 1/4 pound bunch, and another one that's for a 1 pound bunch. So you put a stop on it. The head of the asparagus goes against the stop, and so then at the tail end, it's at 9 inches from the top to the bottom, and then your knife goes down and cuts it. It's guided, so it's straight. Then you put your rubber bands on it. You saw the ladies working with them. They're fast. Not everybody's as fast as these ladies. These ladies are working piecework. That's why you see them moving so fast. They'll make $1,300 a week, some of them. And others doing the same job will just make wages. You know, you can't make less than wages, you can make more. We try to sell it in a day or two, but then once our customer gets it, they have a period of time where they can hold it to sell it. Once we finish harvesting a field for the season, we let it go to fern. As soon as we're done harvesting, we'll go out there and we'll cultivate it, throw some dirt to it, we'll fertilize it, and we'll spray weed killer. Because there's a lot of weeds that especially perennial weeds, that you can't spray during the harvest season because days to harvest. You're harvesting every day, so you can't spray something that has several days to harvest, because your crop will be all messed up. Sometimes you'll go out and spray it if your IPM person goes out there and finds asparagus beetle or rust or whatever diseases. If you see it out there, you might need to go spray. Of course, we realize you've got crop that's this tall, and you're going to have to get that spray boom above it. We have a self-propelled sprayer. We can do that. Not everybody has that. So yeah, there's things you need to look for, so your crop for the next year will be good. And then once the fern dies in the winter, you go out and you'll mow it up. You want to chop it up as fine as you can so it rots, because disease lives in that. You chop that up, you go back and rework the beds, you put weed killer down again, and then spray, you put your fertilizer on, and you're ready to go for the spring. You have to get that done before April, because again, days to harvest. You can't spray weed killer within 2 weeks of when you're going to harvest.
After harvest, apply about 50 pounds of N per acre over the plant, and apply the post-harvest herbicide applications, and then just maintain good soil moisture during the growing season. Again, scout every year for insects, diseases. Apply fungicides as necessary at the end of July, mid-August, and early September. And then in the fall, again, the nutrients translocated to the crown will be available for the crop the following growing season.
To start with asparagus from the beginning, you need that plow. You need to have something to lay the drip, depending on how many acres you're going to do. If it's just going to be an acre, maybe you could just lay that drip and plow your furrow a little deeper, lay the drip by hand, cover it up with 2 inches of soil, and then put the crowns or the transplants in there. You could do it manually. So that would be a real simple way of doing it. But you need the plow so you have a consistent depth. You can't be up and down, because the crop will be inconsistent if you do it that way.
Another part of the advanced planting is to review our equipment needs. We may need some tillage equipment such as middle busters or furrow openers to plant the asparagus, some specialized tillage equipment, containers, boxes, cooling facilities in preparation for the harvest that is coming ahead.
That's in the field. You need to have a couple of the knives. There's a company in California we buy our knives from, and we get our knives to the pouches that the guys wear, the holsters that the pouches are on, files to sharpen their knives. The knives have to be sharpened. If you let them get dull, you're going to have a problem because they won't cut it squarely. There'll be a blunt cut, so that's not good either. You saw the crews harvesting in the field, and they have their long knife with a V at the end, and there's a piece of tape on it at the 10-inch mark. They harvest anything that's 10 inches or above. They'll cut that and then trim it and put it in their box and goes to the packing house. And the next day, all that stuff that was less than 10 inches will be ready to go. There's times in the summer when it's really hot. If it's 90 degrees, you can almost harvest twice a day. We don't, but you could. It's a crop that can grow very fast.
Hi, my name's Sherry Wade. I'm a chef. I owned a successful restaurant in Philadelphia for 11 years. I now currently live in Cape May and also produce a small amount of crops for local businesses. When I'm looking to purchase fresh asparagus, I like the heads to be tight and not blooming, and also the stalk should have crispness to it. When I'm determining the crispness of the asparagus, we like to snap it so it makes that crunchy sound when it snaps. It shouldn't bend and then just be flexible and not snap in half. And also, if the tip of the asparagus is going to sprout and is loose, we would return that to the farm that we are purchasing from. So when I'm looking for a size for asparagus, it depends on how we're going to use it on our menu. Generally, most people like a pencil-sized asparagus, which is thin and tender. The larger asparagus is also great for shaving or also making soups and vinaigrettes for. So if you're growing asparagus that you feel might be a second and not top quality, or you feel is larger, it might have another application. So feel free to reach out to chefs and let them know what you have, because they might still be interested in purchasing it, just maybe at a little bit of a reduced price. But just because a product doesn't fit a set description, a lot of people are interested in still using it. And chefs they like the challenge of being creative. So if you give them that opportunity, I'm sure they'd be happy to still purchase your product. So when purchasing colored asparagus, white is very popular in high-end restaurants. Purple and green are also great for shaving. A lot of restaurants today are pickling products, and that color stays with it. When you're cooking purple asparagus, sometimes the color fades out, but people are doing more raw, light pickled products, and the colored ones shave really nice with a light pickle, and it adds volume and fresh salads and looks really pretty on the plate. Also, if you cross-sell at farmers markets, the colored items usually are pretty popular for home chefs as well.
These various market outlets have different requirements for asparagus size and quality, so it's important to establish your market plan before you start planting asparagus.
So the first time you go to approach a chef at a restaurant, call ahead to make an appointment. When you show up, bring product along so that they can see what you're selling and what you'll be bringing to them in deliveries in the future. Giving a week lead time is great, especially if you're bringing in new products. It gives them an idea of how to change their menu and what to work towards. If you're out of something or you're running short, give them a heads up. Even if it's 2 or 3 days before you're going to run out, let them know so that they can find another local farm to source from.
In order to establish your market, you need to talk to people and find out what the demand is in your area, what their needs are, and what they're willing to pay, and to establish also how much they will need, because you need to size your planting to fit the market that you plan to sell to.
So if you're starting out dealing with restaurants, you might want to start with a smaller restaurant. just because if you're not 100% sure of how much you're going to produce and have for sale each season, it's better to start out small and then grow into the larger restaurants. If you know you're already producing volume, it's great to go into a restaurant that might seat 100 plus people in one seating. But if you're a small local farm that maybe is 10 acres or less, try to start out with the smaller restaurants that you know you can meet their demand and keep them happy so they keep coming back to you season after season. While I always appreciated a season ending and another one starting and having new product available, it is important to think about extending your season. Some chefs don't like to change their menus quite as often, so if you can extend your season a little bit longer and it reduces their stress level with changing things in their restaurant, it would be helpful. So that's why you really want to communicate with the chefs about what you're growing and what direction maybe you should do so that you can continue to have them as a long-term client. So in the winter, when you have some downtime, you might want to approach the restaurant customers that you have or ones that you're thinking about reaching out to see what they'd like to put on their menu. That way it'll help you with planning on what to grow, and it'll help them plan their menus for the next season.
Many local growers do market at the farm site and at their roadside stands. And they usually have anywhere from 3 or 4 to 5 to 10 acres of asparagus. And then the excess that they don't sell at their farm market, they often send to the auction or to a wholesaler. Perennial weeds are a serious problem in asparagus. Some of those perennial weeds that are common would be thistle, pokeweed, even mulberry. Mulberry is a real problem. It grows quickly, and in 1 year it can be almost as big as the asparagus. Also, another problem is morning glory and bindweed. You can see how it's wrapped around the stalk, and it can overwhelm the asparagus plant. It's always important to check with your local county agent for the latest updates on recommendations for production, pest control, and the use of other chemical materials. By being an organic grower, it does give you an opportunity to have a higher price for your product, and also there may be a broader market for that product. Organic production is more expensive because there are no real good effective weed control methods for asparagus, and there are no really good insect control methods. And these two items increase the cost and decrease yields and cause problems in production. However, if a grower is already doing organic and experienced with it, it's worth a try.